Hello everyone, I'm Louisa, Head of Digital Marketing at Traced, and I'm joined today by Matt Boddy, who is CTO at Traced, a provider of mobile security solutions, which includes the Traced app, which can detect stalkerware on a user's phone, and Chloé Messdaghi. She's the VP of Strategy at Point3 Security. She's a research advocate who's passionate about keeping people safe and empowered online. So welcome. Thank you very much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
So I was going to start like Chloé. So you're an advocate against stalkerware. So what actually happens when someone suffers at the hands of this nasty software?
Right. Well, think of it as someone knows everything about you. The thing about the difference between stalkerware and an actual stalker, right? So a stalker physically that we know of back in the day was that the person would watch you from your windows, try to get into your home, but they wouldn't know what's going on in your head. The thing is when we're on our devices, on our phones in particular, we're searching things. We are on social media. We're texting friends. We're having phone calls. It's the first time ever we're in a sense where if you have a stalker, like stalkerware is one of those things that is the greatest thing for them. And the reason for that is because they're able to know everything about you. What's going on in your head? What are your fears? What are the things that you love? And as someone who's a social engineer, knowing that information can give you a lot of power. And one of the things about stalkerware is that individuals that have dealt with it, and usually most of the time, a lot of these cases are by people that were abusive in a relationship. So the thing is that when we're in relationships, we leave our phones near us or far away from us, our computers in another room. And if we have a significant other in our lifetime, and by lifetime I mean at home living with us, the thing is they have access to that. You only need to have physical access to a device to be able to put something on there. Now, the thing is that a lot of times the victims are not aware of it. They've noticed like, this is weird. My battery's dying a lot faster, or noticing that like your phone is just restarting for no reason. The other thing is you can also understand that you'll have moments when your significant other or your ex, whatever, says something like, for example, say you were crying and your phone was near you. He's not in the room. He's somewhere far, far away, but then texts you like, stop crying. So the thing is that, and they'll say something like, oh, I'm psychic. I've picked up on you and everything like that. But in reality, the person has literally put stalkerware on their device. The problem is that it takes a while for victims to understand that that's what's happening to them. Now, when they understand that's happening to them, getting help is a different thing. Because the thing is, once they remove it, that person who put it on there is then notified. And this could be a really scary thing if you're in an abusive relationship. We've had cases where, and I'm going to talk a lot like as if, women are the victims, because majority of them are. But the thing to note about in abusive relationships, the person wants to take over that person. In other words, wants to control their behavior, wants to know everything about that person. And usually stems from insecurities. But in reality, by knowing everything that you're doing, that puts you in a real weird position of a lack of trust. And what we have seen is that the victims, when they're aware of it, if they do remove it, there are cases where the ex shows up, can hurt the individual, and sometimes they even have kids. So this is like a really big deal. The problem is that when you go to FBI or if you go to the police about this, there's a majority of chance they don't know what to do. There are many cases where when someone who is suffering from this goes to try to get help and they think that that person's crazy. But in reality, 1 out of 10 Americans have claimed that they have personally put some sort of spyware, stalkerware on their significant other's device. And those are people that admit to it. So you can just assume that's probably a little bit higher than that, maybe 1 out of 8, maybe even more than that. And that's the thing that's really scary, is that there is no line of privacy anymore. And when you're in an abusive relationship, this is like the greatest thing for an abuser to have, is to know everything at all times.
It is. So do you do you think people are becoming immune to violating other people's privacy?
I feel like some of us have gone to a point where we're like, well, it's already all out there. I mean, what else am I going to do about it? It's not like I have control over my data, which is true. In social media, you don't really have control of your data. You don't know what's being used for. And that's one of the things is that I'm very prominent for pushing the surveillance reform, because that's something that we need. We need to know where our data is being saved, like what are they using the data for? Because I mean, imagine if someone had every single Google search you've ever done and use that information to target ads to you or to get you more and more on that system. And that's what I'm talking about, is that there's a very fine line here of also controlling behavior by knowing your weaknesses or the things that you're interested in. Like I said, social engineers, the greatest thing ever is to know what someone likes and dislikes, because we can use that.
So that's happening in all kinds of industries, isn't it? I mean, we're becoming so used to that in marketing, and we're getting used to Google or Facebook knowing things about us. Maybe in society, we now think it's a bit more acceptable to track what people we love are doing online.
Yeah. I don't think it's a new problem that we've just come across, though, because since the beginning of time, there's, like as Chloe mentioned right at the beginning, there's been stalkers, people that would look through your window. Peeping Toms have been there for a very long time, but with the invent of phones, the moment that there's been the ability to track where somebody is from their mobile device, there's been this ability to kind of use it for a malicious purpose. And Stalkerware has been there for a very long time to enable that, to enable people to be able to track where people are going and what they're doing. And one of the problems with this is there's a fine line between one of the problems that I've seen is there's a fine line between when you're creating one of these tools, or one of these companies are creating one of these tools, they sometimes claim that they're creating it for tracking their kids or tracking your children, as opposed to tracking a spouse. Now, what I've noticed lately is that there's been a lot of previous Stalkerware apps that have been designed specifically for tracking a spouse that have recently, in the past year, just completely rebranded and shifted to say this is entirely for tracking your child, and you cannot do this without the consent of an adult or the person whose device it is. Which to me it's still a massive breach of privacy, because unless it's just tracking the location of that child that could be in danger if they get lost, it's still breaching the personal conversations that they may be having with their friends. And it's really difficult to know the line between, are we stopping them from talking to pedophiles, or are we just spying on their conversations with their friends? And I think that's one of the problems with this in general. I don't know what your thoughts on that are, Chloe.
Oh, okay. I love what you just said there. And the reason for that is that about a month ago, I came across an ad, and this ad showed a teenager girl, or you couldn't really tell if it was a teenager or a college student. It could have been in her early 20s. Like, you really couldn't tell. But it says, like, don't you want to be there to know she's, secure? And it's an app that's for parents to use on their kids. But in reality, this was totally, the ad itself it looked like very direct marketing to partners to track where your girlfriend's going. The other thing is that we see in the news, for example, blog posts of men talking about, hey, you want to catch your wife cheating? Or you think someone's cheating on you? Put this on their phone and find out if she's cheating on you. I mean, you don't really see too many articles where it's like, hey, ladies, check out this app and find out if he's cheating on you. And it's really interesting because it's more targeted to men to track their partner. And this could also be an ex. This could also be a friend. And that's the reality of it, is that it could be anyone, really, if they had access to your phone.
And presumably, even if you're doing it with the best of intentions, say you've got an elderly relative, or your child is hanging out with the wrong kinds of people, and you want to see where they are, you want to see their web browsing history, make sure they're okay. But presumably, these stalkerware, these apps that track other people, they're not concerned with people's privacy or security, and they could be spewing this data all over the internet, and maybe even malware is getting onto the phone via that app. Is that a realistic worry?
Yeah.
Completely. Yeah, I saw, I think it was KlebGuard was recently discovered to be, which is a type of stalkerware, was discovered to recently be hosting people's data in a really, really insecure manner. So they just had an open database full of people's locations that they'd been tracking. So whether that was the spouses of people and the children of other people, these could be minors whose location and their exact location, where they're going to school every single day, their general route home from school, for instance, is all open on the internet that anybody could access with no authentication whatsoever. So sometimes when you're sharing stuff with these services, you kind of consider it as if you're sharing your data with the likes of Google or Facebook, where it may be used for some innocuous purposes, but at least they've got security in mind when they're storing that data, initially at least.
Yeah.
But actually, it's not like that at all. The people that are creating these are trying to possibly make a quick buck, or they're trying to just get this software out there, and they don't really care about security when they're delivering, or at least not always.
No,
so very much true.
What we were saying earlier about the apps that are rebranding themselves, certainly in a couple of years ago, they were quite obvious about they could be used to track spouses and cheating partners, and it does now seem to be a shift towards, track your children to make sure they're safe, even track your employees to make sure that they are working the hours they're supposed to work. But Google last month banned ads for apps that track their spouses, though they were still allowing apps that purport to track children. But now they're talking about changing the Play Store guidelines so that any app that tracks someone has to repeatedly make it clear to that phone's user that they're being tracked. Any thoughts on that? Good idea.
I absolutely love that idea. And the reason for that is that you have to think about it this way. When there is domestic abuse, right, and the partner puts something on her phone or whatnot, the thing is like, okay, she got help or whatnot, or now, but there's still apps out there that is for kids. So now you're tracking your kid because your kid's with your partner. So you find out everywhere where that person is, maybe their safe house.
Yeah.
That's a huge concern. Also, domestic abuse partners, sometimes they will kidnap the kid. And so that's the other thing. By knowing where that kid is at all times, then you can get the kid, and then also demand rights for her to meet him somewhere. And this is a concern that we have when it comes to domestic abusers and stalker. And a lot of people don't get that there is a correlation there, but it really is. Usually, abusers, they want control. They don't have trust. And so they want to know everything about that person. And they might come off as like, well, I care about you, and that's why I wanted to do this, or to, know where you are at all times in case if there's a situation, I know where you are. And that's a really good framing, showing that you care and everything. But in reality, she should voluntarily give it to them whenever she feels like, instead of, enforced by spying on her in other ways.
So do you think this will be a good thing for to force apps to reveal that they are tracking someone? Do you think they will actually do it?
I hope that they do it. And the reason for that is that we need to know, as people, as consumers, we should know what is being tracked, what data is being used, how that data is being shared. Is that data being sold? These are questions that I have as a consumer, and I'm sure that other people do as well. There was a documentary that came out recently called The Social Dilemma, and it also talked about that particular thing, of that companies pretty much can collect any type of data in the US, and the thing is there's no structure in place of what things they can or cannot collect. And that's a huge thing, because if you don't have proper security, that stuff gets out and breaches happen. And especially with COVID-19, we've seen a huge increase of breaches, especially phishing attacks as well. And so it's one of those things that we have to be very careful about. And you did mention something earlier about companies also tracing their employees and making sure that they're working. A lot of companies will not admit that they have it on the computers, but you should always assume. But it is one of those things that, once again, it shows that there's a lack of trust, and that's why these things are being used.
Yeah, and there's a sorry.
No, go for it.
Didn't mean to interrupt. Yeah, there's a matter of time before there is the partner, the jealous ex or whatever it happens to be, working in the IT department with that bossware, that tracking software on their partner's device, and they're once again collecting data on where they are, where what messages are being sent from that person, all from a corporate system through a legitimate means in a way. And it's the same issue. It's the same issue that we've got with Stalkerware, with corporate bossware. That data is in the hands of somebody that knows the person that they are tracking, and it's whether they completely misuse that or abuse that privilege that they've got, that privileged access.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then we also have those employers that may have crushes on their employees. So that's another fear to have, because then they'll know what they're doing, where do they live, who's at their home, if their camera isn't covered.
Yeah.
And that's, once again, that's something scary. You want to have a personal life outside of your work.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the ban that's coming in place from Google on these adverts and on these Play Store apps, for instance, is really good. It's a step in the right direction. I think we can all agree on that. The only issue is that some of the stalkerware that I've analyzed, I've reverse engineered a few samples of stalkerware, and from what I've seen of that stalkerware, it's primarily not coming from the Google Play Store. There's a lot of it out there where you just download it from the browser and get it on the device. Now, I'm not a huge advocate of saying everything should absolutely come from the Play Store and they should ban everything else, because it needs to be an open market. There's completely different argument for a different day to be had about how it should be an open market and it shouldn't be entirely monopolized by Google. But because of, I've gone really off track there, but because of that, because it's coming from anywhere that it happens, it's coming from just a web browser where they download it and install it. That person that may have access to your device, as you mentioned at the beginning of this talk, Chloe, is going to accept all of the security notifications that are going to pop up on that device to say that they want to install that software and they want to track everything that's going on that device. They want to be able to see your WhatsApp messages, your Instagram messages, your everything that's hosted there on that phone.
Yeah, it is true that most of the stalkerware that is being used are from third-party application stores, and also from just downloading it from a browser and whatnot. Which is definitely one of those things that is a huge fear, because even though Google and Apple are taking necessary steps to reduce stalkerware, the thing is that you can still get it at the end of the day. And that's the hardest thing, is that it's still out there. And it's one of those things that we have to consider when it comes to the victims, because a lot of people believe okay, once it's gone off your phone, you're able to live a normal life. This is not true. What happens is that now you are constantly concerned that it's on your device. So you'll see people like victims and whatnot buying multiple devices and then throwing them away because a little glitch happened, or like a technical glitch happened. So they think that it's back. And so and a lot of times is the people that are victims, they don't work in cybersecurity. So they don't know how to go about it, how to check really. And this is a huge problem, because not just that, going for help, if everyone is basically like, oh, we can't help you, or the FBI is like, well, you have no evidence, or you can't even bring it to a court case, even if you know it's that person, that leaves the victim never being able to have closure. And then just the constant is my email account okay? Is this okay? And you're always at the edge of your seat. And then it comes to issues with trust later on as well. I mean, I definitely have heard from other victims that they didn't want to like update their phone because they're worried that all the evidence would be gone, or they went to another phone, but they used the same phone number. And like sometimes even if you do a hard restart or whatnot, it doesn't get rid of it. And that's the scary part, is like, so how do we get the average person to know whether or not they're safe? What are the signs for them? How do they go about this? Because I feel like most of the time victims need someone to like hold their hand throughout the process, and it takes a long time, and definitely therapy is involved too as well.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I've noticed from victims that have been affected by this is that they don't know they don't know the terminology. They don't know to go to the police station and say, I've got stalkerware. They say, I'm being stalked, or I'm being cyber stalked, and I've got spyware, which might necessarily, you said it earlier, and I hate to repeat it because it's a horrible fact that's happening at the moment, is that people are going into the police station thinking that they're losing their mind in that they're being stalked, and they think that it's in their heads, but it's not necessarily. It's not in their heads. And the problem is that this kind of the paranoia that this can obviously spark can lead you to think that it may be other things. They may jump to other conclusions about how they've got this information about them. They may think it's wiretaps in their house, or I heard one person speaking about the satellite TV being potentially compromised, which it may well. I don't know too much about compromising satellite TV, but it may well be that. But it's much more likely that it's this very easy to obtain software that's very easy to deploy by anybody down the street.
So
unfortunately,
how is it deployed, Matt? How can someone else get stalkerware onto your phone?
Yeah, so it could be deployed via a number of methods. It could be deployed via side loading on a Android device where they plug in a USB and push it on there. It could be via the web browser. They could download something via the web browser and click on the app. It could be a simple tracking app from the Play Store that they've installed on the device.
So as long as they've got your device to hand and they know the PIN code to unlock it,
then they could get it on the device. Primarily, it's going to be via that physical access. Right. Yeah. By the way, I've noticed that I'm getting darker and darker, and I'm actually fading more into this back wall here as I'm becoming a floating head.
Why is that? Did you turn a light on?
I do, because the light's gone from the outdoor world. I'm going to go and turn the light on.
Okay. Chloé, and Matt, what steps should you take if you think that you are a victim? If this is ringing a bell with someone, then they went, hang on, I didn't know that it was called stalkerware, but I was in this awful relationship, and he seems to know where I work now and my address and who I'm talking to. What should that person do?
So one of the things about abusive relationships is that the partner who's abusive will try to push them away from everyone else, so they have no friends. So that's the one thing to note, right? So the problem is that when we have that situation, they have to find someone that they can trust. And that's really hard in many ways, especially if you have been isolated now because of a relationship. But usually go to a family member or like a best friend and whatnot. But I really do recommend is checking out Coalition Against Stalkerware. It's a great organization that really does provide like a safety toolkit, letting you know what to do, what are the next steps, how to check, learn a little bit more about stalkerware as well. And that's always my recommendation for everyone, is that if you do believe that, your battery is dying a little bit faster, or you're seeing a little technical glitches here and there, go check out Coalition Against Stalkerware and just see if you are in that position or not. But it also teaches you how to get out of that position for like the easier cases. Now, there are more complicated cases of stalkerware, like I said, that even if you do a factory reset, it's still there. If that's the case, it's best to get another number and to get another phone on that front. I have seen where people had to do that. But it's really important to note that, like, if you need to break free, that means get a new email address, use that one for your personal accounts. The first thing you should do anyway is to change all your passwords. Also, get a password manager. Do this on someone else's computer just to be on the safe side if necessary, or get a new computer if you can afford it. I do know people that what happens is that every time they have a breakup, they buy a new computer and a new phone. And the reason for that is that they're concerned that that person might have had access to the devices and may have done something, and they just don't want to deal with it. And that's something that we tend to see a lot with people that are victims have had something like that happen to them before. So it's one of those things, like, it's definitely a psychological mind situation. And then there's also been cases I know of those that did seek for therapy. They thought that they were making it up too. And so that made it even worse. So it's really important to find the right therapist, ones that are going to be behind you on this, because you do have PTSD-like symptoms usually. And the longer it goes for, like sometimes we have cases of people dealing with it for years, the longer it's going to take probably to heal from.
Matt, how can the Trace app fit into the process?
So the Trace app can help identify whether Stalkerware is currently on your device. It can help you detect known variants of Stalkerware as well as some unknown variants of Stalkerware as well, based on what previous known variants of Stalkerware look like. And it can also tell you when your location's being accessed. It can tell you when your camera's being accessed and your microphone is being accessed, for a bit of peace of mind. So that is kept in a log on the Trace app, so you can see if, for instance, a malicious app has been installed or a bit of Stalkerware has been installed, and you then, within the Trace app, you'll be able to see a log of when the camera is accessed from that point to see if there's some unusual times, or if you're looking at your phone or doing something else, or in a position where you wouldn't want your camera to be coming on. It would just give you a little hint that it's currently on Android, that is. Now, one thing that I've seen recently as well is a different type of kind of stalking of messaging, which is just through WhatsApp. Have you ever used WhatsApp web before? I don't know. I have used it a few times, where you basically get WhatsApp messages coming through into your browser. I'm making it sound like I'm just learning about technology, but basically what it's doing is it's just a web form. It's like an instant messenger. It just pops it in your browser. I don't know why I'm explaining WhatsApp from the ground up. I need to start again here. But basically what it's doing, what people are able to do with that is they're able to take it, because the way in which you sign into WhatsApp web is by taking WhatsApp on your phone and scanning a QR code, which is in your web browser. So by scanning that QR code, everything comes up. There's no other form of authentication there. So there has been cases where stalkers have just gone onto their web browser on their computer and just pointed the phone at their web browser and then essentially been signed in from that point on. Now, you can go into the settings on your WhatsApp and just clear out all previously authenticating browsers just by going into WhatsApp web in WhatsApp in your phone, whether that's iPhone or Android. And when you clear out those previously authenticated sessions, it will kick them off. So if somebody has been spying on just your WhatsApp messages via that means, that can get them out of there. But there are a few ways that this stalking can take place. This kind of cyber stalking can take place, and that is one of them, along with these apps being installed on your device, which take everything. They hoover up your location, all messages from all apps, and that's where installing the Trace app can help you identify it. But as Chloe mentioned earlier, uninstalling it should be taken. You should take caution before you go ahead and uninstall that app, just because if the stalker finds out that you've uninstalled the app and that you've become aware of the problem, then it can turn a bit more dangerous very quickly. So it's definitely worth seeking advice from your local police, and figuring out what the best course of action to do to stop that abusive partner or person that is stalking you, and stop them, and stop that altogether.
Right. Traced are now members of the Coalition Against Stalkerware, which is great, and I will post a link to them in the comments for this video. I think it about wraps it up for our chat. Thank you, Matt and Chloe, for your insights into Stalkerware. And viewers, if you have any comments or questions, please feel free to send them to us and we will do our best to answer. Thank you very much.